Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another movie review, and this is yet again another follow-up to my previous review. And today I'm reviewing a film I haven't seen in a while, and it's a film out of the three films in this series that I've watched the least amount. And upon rewatching it, I have to say it lost a little bit of its charm, but it still is a fun film. And I can obviously still say, since I still enjoy it, that I actually did have the pleasure of watching this movie in the theater when it came out. That would be 11 years ago now. It is, of course, Austin Powers in Goldmember. It's gold, it's gold, it's gold, it's gold, it's solid gold, baby. Now, like the previous film, it's directed by Jay Roach and written by Mike Myers and Michael McCullers. And since I already talked about those two partnerships in the previous review, I'm not going to go into it. Score once again done by George S. Clinton. Now, the movie was made on a budget of $63 million, which the previous two movies I could see their budgets. This one not so much. I have a feeling there was a little bit of ego backstage, so there was a little bit of a hike in salary, which that would explain it. I think at most it should probably be about the same, made for the same as the previous one, or maybe a little bit more, but not that much. I know there's probably something there. And it made $296 million, almost $297, so I can say it deserved to make its money back. It's definitely a slight step down from the previous two films, you know, the series. Maybe starting to wear out its welcome here, but it still is funny. I'd say it's funnier than a lot of the comedies that I've seen in the last couple of years. Or at least the ones that have been making money that you're like, that movie made money? Anyway, on IMDb, which you gotta go back real quickly, check what it is. It has a 6.1. So the lowest score out of all of them. And on Rotten Tomatoes, also a big drop in score from the previous one. A 47 with the audience, but oddly enough a 54 with the critics, which I find a little bit odd. The previous one had a 51. It's like, you gave it a 3% higher score? Anyway, here's a consensus. While the narrative structure is messy and doesn't make much sense, the third installment of the Austin Powers franchise contains enough inspired bits to entertain. I can agree with that. I'll say the narrative structure is a little messy, but I'm starting to think it might have been intentional. Like, I noticed one thing I never noticed before is that there's a little plot point about microfilm that doesn't go anywhere. I haven't watched the deleted scene, so I don't know if there was one with that, or if it was, you know, like the whole thing with Vanessa in the second movie, just a little joke about plot points that don't go anywhere. But if that's the case, it should have made it a little bit more obvious, because it would have made more sense. Or maybe they decided to just ignore it like the elephant in the room. Don't pretend you don't see me. Don't pretend you don't know why I'm here. Anyway, I think we all know the reason this film was made. You know, previous two films were successes, so let's do another film. Anyway, the plot of the film is that Dr. Evil now has a new lair behind the famous Hollywood sign, and he outlines his newest plan. He's going to go back in time to 1974 and bring back a man by the name of Johann Vanderschmut, aka Goldmember, who developed a cold fusion unit for a tractor beam, which Dr. Evil nicknames Preparation H. Get the joke. Anyway, the reason Goldmember is called Goldmember is because he was involved in an unfortunate smelting accident, which I can tell you as a kid, this joke went over my head. You know, another one that went over my head. I'm like, why is it called Goldmember? I could get part of the parody that it's making fun of, you know, Goldfinger, that thing, but I didn't get the rest of the joke until more recently, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. But before Dr. Evil could put his plan to action, he is caught by Austin Powers, which is part of the joke, is he caught in the first act, which he actually deleted a little tidbit in that scene where he's like, wow, can't believe I was caught in the first act. Which they do show when they show this movie on TV. I only know that they're flipping channels one day. Because of this, Austin is knighted, finally. His dad doesn't show up to the knighting ceremony, which causes a little joke. And not long after that, Austin's father, Nigel Powers, is kidnapped. Now, there's only one clue, and that is that the genitalia of the men assigned to guard Nigel Powers have been painted gold. So, by their logic, they feel only one man can possibly understand the psychology of a madman. They go to see Dr. Evil in a parody of Silence of the Lambs. And Dr. Evil gives them the info in exchange for a prison transfer. Austin goes back in time to 1975 to rescue his dad. He almost does. Goldmember comes forward in time with Austin's dad, but Austin comes forward in time with a new ally, Foxy Cleopatra, played by Beyoncé Knowles, which I know she's been in a few other films, which I haven't seen her other roles, but I'll say this role in this film I thought she did a pretty good job, especially since her character is like an embodiment of the blaxploitation female characters. You can tell with how she talks, so I thought she did a good job with that. And her character is an FBI agent who is an undercover disco singer who has a history with Austin, which they kind of do nail when they first see each other, which is kind of funny. Now they come forward in time, they have to stop Dr. Evil, along with help from Mindy, which you could kind of tell this is going to happen, which I'll get to it in a little bit. And that's about all the main part of the plot I'm going to talk about. Direction-wise, with how the camera was shown, I thought Jay Roach did a pretty good job. I thought the actors did good for the material they're given, because I'll say this is easily the weakest of the three. It's not as funny as the previous two, but it was still an enjoyable film. It does actually deal with some themes you wouldn't think an Austin Powers film would probably deal with, like it deals with Austin's daddy issues. Of course, the previous two films also dealt with daddy issues, but in a different way. This time as the protagonist. It deals a little bit with sibling rivalry and feeling abandoned in favor of another sibling. That's the whole thing with Mindy, Dr. Evil, and Scott Evil. And deals with acceptance a little bit. And that's about all the serious themes, but it's done in a humorous way. And it also makes fun of movies within a movie, because that's how the beginning starts, with a life movie starring Tom Cruise as Austin Powers. Yeah, it's just funny. Kevin Spacey is Dr. Evil, Danny DeVito is Mindy, and directed by Steven Spielberg. It's just a funny little thing. Now, Mike Myers, he's still good as Austin, Dr. Evil, and Fat Bastard for a little bit he's in the movie, but it's a step down from how he was in the second film, but he's still pretty good, especially with the material. As Goldmember, he's very interesting, to say the least. He's, in a way, Goldmember is kind of the true bad guy of the film. And he's just a weird character. He's like a character that you'd probably see on Saturday Night Live in a random sketch, but I guess it kind of fits Myers' acting style as well as his writing and character style. So it fits. And I think as Austin, I thought he did a pretty good performance during some of the more emotional scenes. Specifically, the scenes involving him and his father, like when him and his father have that little argument after Goldmember gets away, where they're all talking like, I didn't need a friend, I needed a father. A little jab at parents to try to be friends with their kids instead of trying to be parents, which, by the way, I hate parents like that. You're a parent. Siblings are the ones who are supposed to be friends, not parents. You're supposed to be a parent. You're supposed to actually get in there and make sure they don't do bad crap. Maybe this is also speaking from the fact that I have issues with my own parents, but there's another day, another video. And Dr. Evil is still pretty good. Doesn't really have any amazing acting moments as a character in this one. More just like comedic ones, like when the globe hits him in the head and Minnie drops the meteor. Acting moment, probably the closest one that comes to standing out is probably when they do the parody of super dramatic moments later in the movie. At least that's what I saw it as. Fat Bastard, like the ending of the second movie, has a dramatic speech thing, but the second movie was better. Goldmember, just weird. Like I said earlier, Beyoncé Knowles, she did a pretty good job as Foxy Cleopatra. I could buy her as a blaxploitation female character. And you could buy her chemistry with Austin. It's not as good as the chemistry in the previous film, but I'd say it's probably on par with the chemistry in the first film, but in a different manner. Because unlike those two, he actually has a prior history with this character, so you buy that. And of course, unlike the other two, he does not go all the way with Foxy, but I think it kind of fits a little bit with how the plot is laid out. Michael York as Basil Exposition. Less screen time, but still good as a character that is there just to provide exposition. Robert Wagner, background character, not really much to say about him. Good to see him back again, although I wonder how much he got paid this time. Seth Green as Scott Evil. Like the previous two films, still has issues with his dad, but this is where he begins to settle him, and then it goes all south in the end. And I find it interesting that he starts to become evil in this film to placate his dad, and his dad, you know, starts to like him more, and it kind of swings the opposite way from the previous film where he was doting all on Mini-Me and just basically ignoring Scott. In this film, when Scott's turned evil, he goes all the way and like, I love Scott, and then he basically just ignores Mini-Me, which a little bit of a sibling rivalry thing there. And of course, Mini-Me, you know, feels abandoned about that, and Verne Troyer actually did a pretty good job as Mini-Me with that. And of course, there are times in this movie where Seth Green is over the top, but I think it kind of fits because he's trying to show his dad he can be evil, like when he does his super over the top laugh. I thought that kind of fit the scene, especially since it even creeps out Dr. Evil, and Dr. Evil does the over the top villain laugh that 60s and 70s villains were known for. Fred Savage is interesting in the role as number 3, aka the Mole Man. You know, funny. And then, let's see, Nobu Matsuhisha as Mr. Roboto. He did a pretty good job for what he had to do. And the rest of them, we get Clint Howard again. Thought he did a good job. And then, oh yeah, the one I actually skipped, I think I should have mentioned earlier. Michael Caine as Nigel Powers. Could they have cast anyone more perfect as Austin's father? I do not think so. He really does fit as Austin's dad, and you can tell they have a little bit of a chemistry there. Probably one of my favorite scenes with them is when they're actually talking in English slang in front of the American girls. Just the stuff they're saying and what it's supposed to mean. It is funny as hell. I do still wonder though what they're saying in that one part where the subtitles just say question mark before they lead up to sat on a turtle. Why, do they have Super Mario over at the party? Is that why they sat on a turtle? Do they want to make soup? And of course, the moment I mentioned before with the little argument about him not being a father, or Nigel not seeing it that way, I thought he did a pretty good point with there. And of course, tying it all up with, you have an issue, here's a tissue. That's not funny. No, send in the Nazi, played by John Cleese. That's not funny! And of course the dramatic scene at the end with the revelation, which story-wise it's like, huh? But I think it's making fun of, you know, stuff like that revealed in sequels, so I thought it worked. Now one thing I find interesting is that Heather Graham apparently had a scene that was deleted, and it's not on the DVD at all, and it makes me wonder why it was not put on the DVD. Was it a rights issue, or was it they decided just not to film it? Was it an incomplete scene or something? Just makes me wonder what it would entail, because that's one thing about the movie that is never really explained is whatever happened to Felicity Shagwell. Because at least with Vanessa, they gave a story explanation for why she was there, and it actually helped the film because it added a little bit of humor to it. This one, it's like, where is she? My only guess with that is that without the explanation, it's making fun of how Bond girls seem to disappear in between films, for the most part. That's probably that. But it still does make me wonder what that scene did entail. Was it like her showing up at one point? Because I know they have that scene, the deleted scene with the Japanese twins and Foxy looking at them. I'm like, well. But anyway, on the whole, a step down from the previous film. But I wouldn't say this is a film that suffers from the third filmitis, which moviegoers, you should probably already know what that is. But in case you don't, it's in a film series where by the time they get to the third film, it always seems to disappoint. Granted, I could say I do like some of the films that are like that, but I'll obviously say there's step downs. Like Alien 3 is a sufferer of this. To some people, X-Men 3 is a sufferer from this. Ironic, made by the same company. Some people might say that Star Wars, the original trilogy, suffers from this, but I don't agree with that. You know, just trying to think of this off the top of my head, but Beverly Hills Cop, most people seem to agree with that. Some people would probably say Lethal Weapon, but it seems at least among the people I know, they seem to say it's the fourth film that suffers from it, but I guess it depends on who you ask. Yeah, I'm actually thinking back there. Scream, depending on who you ask. Well, not Exorcist. Exorcist suffers from second filmitis. Star Trek is another interesting case. Most people seem to think only the even number ones are good, but anyway, that's all I can think of that. My rating for Austin Powers and Goldmember is a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Like I said, not as good as the previous two films, but still a comedy that funny in its own way, and could have been better, but for what it is, it's an entertaining film. I'm happy I have it in my collection. Part of my collection right here. And I do plan on watching it again in the future.